Well, we're joined now by Ann Coulter, a guest who really needs no introduction, but Ann has a Substack now. You can go ahead and follow that. She's going to be doing a live Rumble on Thursday. So she's, of course, the New York Times bestselling author of 13 books and has been speaking out against the war in Iran. So first, Ann, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Ann.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Let's start with this post. This was after the White House Correspondents' Center attempted assassination. You wrote on X, at this point, more California teachers have tried to assassinate Trump than Iranians have. I really wish he'd get back to domestic concerns and stop cleaning up the rest of the world. For you, have you been surprised that Trump went to war in Iran? I mean, you've sort of famously had a break with him over many years now. You wrote, what was the joke? You wrote that he could perform abortions on the Resolute desk and you would still vote for him in 2016, if I'm remembering correctly. So is any of this surprising in Iran?
Yes, and I wrote that after his immigration policy paper came out, written by the brilliant Stephen Miller. It's still, I think it should be the touchstone for any Republican running, or well, for anything, any Republican in office. In any event, they're finally getting around to some of that. Second term, he sort of blew it off first term, thus my break with him. So it isn't, the Trump supporters aren't entirely a personality cult. I always found his personality rather repulsive, but loved the stuff he was running on so I could overcome such superficialities. And yes, I think like most people, it's unbelievable that he started another pointless war without provocation. Let's just, drop bombs on countries all over the world and see if we make friends that way. It really, I mean, every president, Paul Johnson wrote this in Modern Times. I think it's on Modern Times, the great British historian, that every US president runs on not taking the country to war, and they almost always get us into war. For some reason, presidents seem to think that's what makes them great. This is turning out to be, as many of us suspected at the time, a much bigger quagmire that is going to turn out much worse than the status quo ante, certainly than Iraq. Iraq is at least better off. And I was a big supporter of the Iraq War. They did hit us first, if we're talking about, the craziness out of the Middle East. I mean, this has just been a disaster from beginning to end.
And how do you think this keeps happening? Like you said, you supported that war with Iraq. I would say, yeah, I mean, Al-Qaeda hit us first. I don't know if Saddam Hussein did. But in the interim, yeah, we can understand, I think, the fervor of the country, even if we think it was built on lies. But you were a key part, I think, with your book, Adios America, which I remember having read on my first couple days over at the Daily Caller, of the, architect, really, of the move, I think, for immigration restriction in a reaction to the Romney and the Bush era. So you broke with Trump really over that, but one of the parts that we all kind of thought was a rejection of neoconservatism, specifically with the selection of the vice president and many of the other national security officials who work in the government. And yet we actually got something much worse this second time than even in the first. What's your assessment? How do you think this happened?
Yeah, it's weird how I've always liked the neoconservatives. It's weird how that has just come to mean nothing but pointless wars these days. I mean, back when I was supporting the Iraq War, and I would again, I always sort of want to go back and argue that one and point out how it was very different. Didn't want to stay there for 10 years, but I know that's kind of off the point. But they kept calling me a neoconservative back during those times. I had to point out, no, I'm not Jewish. The history of the neoconservatives were Jewish intellectuals who realized the Democratic Party was insane. And you had a lot of really smart, great people like Norman Podhoretz coming out of that. So it's sort of unfortunate that the word has now come to be so closely associated with pointless wars around the world. And even if there were some point to this war, and I really don't think there is, I think there's a lot of fear mongering, as always happens. I'm interviewing on my live Substack, or rather live Rumble, this Thursday, John Tierney was a longtime science reporter for the New York Times and now is at City Journal. And he's written a lot of brilliant books, one of which is The Power of Bad. And basically punishment works better than reward, that sort of thing. But one of the things he says about the power of bad is countries always overestimate the threat when they're going into war. And they also overestimate the ease of their victory. And he talks about Germany before World War I and, how it was so afraid and thought, oh, we'll just brush them aside. Talks about the Gulf War, talks about Iraq. And oh my gosh, did we see that in like 3 weeks' time with the Iran war? Way overestimation of the threat. The only column I wrote about this was using the exact same arguments they use for Iran with like every other country in the world. Are we going to bomb any country where 40 years ago someone held a death to America sign? Trump did knock out their nuclear capacity last year. And as I said in a recent, I usually at the end of the week do 5 stories on my Substack that either people have missed or they're missing some crucial part of it, my take on 5 stories. And one, I did 3.5 this week. And one was, does anyone really believe that Iran, if it had a nuke, and I don't think it was on the verge of getting a nuke, would bomb Miami, would bomb Israel? I mean, if mutually assured destruction has worked for more than 50 years, a lot of awful countries have nukes. Start with North Korea. It's not like we're constantly living in terror. Is North Korea going to nuke us? Well, they could right now. And they're an awful regime. They're a more evil regime than Iran. And why aren't we worried about it? Because if they did that, they would, to quote Trump from a few weeks ago, we would watch a civilization die. The entire country would be destroyed. And even I think people like you and me would say, you nuked Miami, we're leveling the entire country. It's a horrible thing to say, but it works. And this idea that Iran was, desperate to get a nuke, so we're hitting New York City. Does anyone seriously believe that?
When I wanted to ask about, we're now 2 months in just about to this war in Iran, and you've mentioned a couple of times that the way you see it, this is shaping up to be something worse than Iraq. And Professor Robert Pape has been on our show saying that it looks like it could potentially even be worse than Vietnam in some ways. So what are you seeing? I mean, as these peace negotiations go back and forth, Iran right now has reportedly said they would open the Strait of Hormuz if there were negotiations over the nuclear material tabled. Trump has not taken that deal. So what do you make of where we are right now? Why is your sense that this could actually potentially put us in a worse situation than the Iraq war did?
Well, I sort of wish everyone would stop reporting on the Iran war and just say, good job, Mr. President. Whoa, you've accomplished everything you wanted to. Because, I mean, we're just waiting for a way out for Trump to be able to save face thus far in the war. The claims were we wanted regime change. From what I understand, the new regime is same as the old regime. Some say worse. We were going to destroy their capacity to build a nuclear weapon. And we were going to inspire the Iranian people to stand up and overthrow the mullahs, and it would suddenly be a functioning democracy, much like Connecticut. No regime change. They haven't risen up. And in fact, the bombing has turned, as I interviewed Jacob Heilbrunn recently, of the national interest. And he made the point, which I've heard before, but he's more intellectual than I am on these issues. He said, in fact, the attempt to demoralize civilizations by heavy bombings, like the Dresden bombings, does exactly the reverse. It gets even citizens who are, opposed to a war with another country. You start bombing the civilians, and they get their backs to the wall, and suddenly, they unite in patriotism behind whatever the regime is. So that has exactly the opposite effect of what it was supposed to do. And now we're basically down to our sole war objective is to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before the war started.
Right. And I want to get your reaction to some rising tides in MAGA world supporting Marco Rubio for 2028. Let's go ahead and put F2 guys up there on the screen. This is from Politico. They say White House insiders see Rubio on the rise as a potential 2028 pick. Marco Rubio, of course, famously, failed in his 2016 primary, in large part, I think, in support of amnesty and some of the work that he did in the Obama years. And yet he's kind of beloved by Trump right now for his work on Iran and the poster boy for the successful Venezuela operation. What do you make of this in context of Trump's heir in 2028?
I don't want Marco Rubio within 10 miles of the White House. I will never, ever relent on that. He is Mr. Amnesty. It was, I've talked to Stephen Miller and a few others about this. When Rubio's amnesty bill was going through, and he had pushed for it in the Florida legislature, I should say, he lied to the voters. It was a big issue. Joyce Kaufman, big talk radio host in Florida, expressly made him promise when he was running as the Tea Party candidate for Senate in Florida, made him promise he would never push or vote for amnesty when he got to the U.S. Senate. He swore on his mother's life, swore up and down. He gets elected as a Tea Party candidate, gets to the United States Senate, and first bill, amnesty. And what was terrifying about it is, it's hard to sort of switch gears when you're so in favor of a Republican candidate running against the rhino. You just have it set in your head, much like it's happening with Trump right now. This is our savior. This is the guy who's standing up to the establishment and going to defeat the swamp. You couldn't get people to switch off of Rubio. Wait, now he's pushing amnesty. So who supported Rubio's amnesty? Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing them all say...
Not Mark Levin. The principled Mark Levin?
I distinctly remember him saying, I almost crashed my car in the radio. What Rubio was saying to push it, we have de facto amnesty now, which has been an argument forever. Yeah, okay, let's deport them. In any event, Levin's saying, I've never heard that argument before. So anyway, they all supported it. I didn't even know Stephen Miller then. We met soon thereafter. And we all thought, that's it. Of course, Rupert Murdoch was courting Rubio and, taking him into lunch. And he is my candidate because he was pushing amnesty. I don't know what it is with Rupert Murdoch and open borders, but he loves them. We were just thinking, wow, if this goes through, it's over. It's done. It's what George Bush said about terrorists. We have to win every time. They only have to win once. Mm-hmm. Same thing with amnesty. We have to win every time. They win once, the country is so done. It may be done now, but it is so done. So no, I'll never, he talks a good game now. Glad to have him aboard, but I will never, ever, ever trust him. Marco Rubio, that is.
What do you think Republican voters do if they have a choice between Rubio and Vance? They've said that they wouldn't run together, but if that's the direction, where do you think Republican voters go?
Well, let's hope there's a debate. You may recall Vance has a very high IQ and is very good in debates. Rubio, not so much. Remember his little exchange with Chris Christie. I will say, I will give him credit for a few things. He has come around. He's good on amnesty and deportations now. Great. Glad to have him aboard. He's also very glib and he's a good talker when he's just giving a straight speech. I noticed this even when I hated him, when he was campaigning, when he's standing in front of a town hall, he'll give a good speech, but he is not quick on his feet. So I'd say after a debate or two, Vance will be the clear winner. I also think Vance, I don't know. He's part of this administration. He is really, really in a bind. I feel sorry for him, but everyone knows he was against this war. He's kind of kept his mouth shut. I don't know. I talked to Jacob Heilbrunn about this and said, should Vance come out and say he's against this war? Should he go on some huge podcast and say this is a disaster? Well, it's betraying the president.
Right.
But perhaps saving his political career. And as between the two of them, I think it's pretty clear Rubio was actually a strong supporter of the war, and Vance is keeping his mouth shut and just being a loyal vice president.
And do you worry that in the way that the Iraq war kind of killed an entire generation of conservatism, do you think maybe that the Iran war and some of other Trump's more brazen stuff, corruption, I know you've highlighted that before with Steve Witkoff or Jared Kushner, do you worry that it'll kill immigration politics forever in terms of immigration restriction? Or not forever, at least for a generation?
I don't think so. I mean, for one thing, even now with Trump's poll numbers just in the toilet on every issue, the one issue he's winning on is immigration. That is always popular.
Yeah, it's his highest number.
It's like chocolate ice cream. You can never go wrong. It's always a winner, immigration. And oh my gosh, I wish he'd get back to that. Not just because he would become popular again, but because that's what needs to be done. And from what I can tell, you people may be more closer to the ground on these young people in Washington and political types, but I get the sense that, yeah, they're really ticked off at the war, but it seems like, and it is an utter aberration. That's why we liked Trump. I mean, he attacked Jeb Bush and called his brother a liar and took us into this. He was so aggressive against a more rational war, the war in Iraq, that who could have possibly seen this coming? I was at a Real Clear Politics salon a week ago, and there was a liberal there, you know, saying, surprisingly, everyone there but one person. I thought it was going to be me against the room. It was like 30 people, both conservative and liberal, and it was all off the record, so I can't mention any of them. I probably shouldn't even be saying what I'm saying now. But shockingly, I was in the majority. So anyway, a liberal yelled at us all, not yelled at us, but taunted us and said, why didn't you see this coming?
Yeah.
And because he lied. How can you possibly see that coming? He could not have been clearer. I mean, it would be like Ronald Reagan getting elected and saying, the heck with taxes. I'm hiking them through the roof.
Right.
And it's going to be total capitulation with the Soviet Union. All you can do is look at what people say. And unlike immigration, where every once in a while there's a little backsliding with Trump, there was never even any backsliding on the pointless wars. I mean, just before the election, I'm sorry, I'm rambling so much.
Oh, God.
But
No.
Your viewers probably know this, but just before the war, there were all these tweets from people like Stephen Miller and J.D. Vance, and being retweeted by Trump. Kamala will take you to war. If you don't want to go to war with Iran, vote Trump. I mean, every possible signal. Nobody could have seen this gigantic of a betrayal. I mean, I still think the immigration betrayal is bigger because it's more important. This is just, $200 billion being wasted. We could have built 17. We could have built 100 walls for that. But that's more important to saving the country, the immigration.
Oh. And then I wanted to also ask you about the DOJ indictment of the Southern Poverty Law Center, given your legal background and also the fact that you have been following closely the SPLC for many years. There are competing interpretations of what was in that grand jury indictment that was unveiled last week. There are clearly a lot of bank records showing what appears to be money from the SPLC to confidential informants who may have been then getting funneled to the government. We don't totally know that yet, but then into groups like, what is it, National Alliance, some Klan groups and the like. What was your takeaway from what we saw out of the DOJ last week?
Well, a couple of things. The first thing is it's absolutely driving me crazy how many alleged conservatives, i.e. on Fox News, keep saying, oh, well, the Southern Poverty Law Center, they used to do good work. Oh, they started as a serious civil. No, they didn't. They never did good work. They're getting Southern Poverty Law Center, I assume this is the most generous interpretation, confused with those two, the Student Nonviolent Organizing Committee, whatever it was called, and another one with very similar initials, Martin Luther King's organization. Southern Poverty Law Center, I just did one of my 3.5 things, free, no ad Substack on this. It started in 1971. At that point, well, Richard Nixon had been in office for 3 years, and despite what liberals might have you believe, there was never a greater civil rights champion than Richard Nixon. In fact, that's why he chose Agnew as his vice president. He was just some little-known Maryland politician. But Agnew had aggressively pushed fair housing laws so that Black people couldn't be discriminated against in housing. He gave an inaugural speech. I wish I had the precise lines from it, but it was about how, after all, America had put Black people through, no, we owed them a dividend now, something to that effect. There was more school desegregation under President Richard Nixon than before or after. It basically ended segregation. He ended segregation of the schools. So that had already been going on for 3 years. And then, I mean, the Klan didn't even exist in 1971. And Morris Dees, the head of Southern Poverty Law Center, when he first got out of law school, had a client that was funded by the KKK. He defended white supremacists. He had, of course, he was famous in his office, Southern Poverty Law Center, for discriminating against Black people, for sexual harassment, and eventually got moved out from that. It's a money laundering organization to hit up gullible, frightened liberals in New York City to say, Klan is rising, Klan is rising. And no, the Southern Poverty Law Center never did anything good. Even the ones who defended, the liberals who worked for it, realized it was utterly corrupt and left. They'll say, well, I did some good things. You know, we fought to keep a Ten Commandments monument out of a courthouse. And thus was poverty ended.
My last question for you, Ann, is just about populism in general. So you were an early supporter, 2016. You recognize those currents. It's worked out a little bit less than I think many of us would have hoped. We've seen titanic amounts of corruption with Jared Kushner, with Steve Witkoff. I saw you retweet this one. Let's put F3 up here on the screen, which is just like a perfect example. Is some DHS counterterrorism official allegedly was under investigation for a sugar daddy complaint. You've got Kash Patel, you know, guys like this who are, you know, who's a 41-year-old man with his Nashville girlfriend tweeting about how incredible she is. How do you think all this happened? You know, these types of people who came into power under this administration. You're a very intelligent person. You've observed all of this over the years. What happened here? Because I'm mystified too.
Some of them I think were very, very poor choices, and I made my opinion very clear on that from the beginning. Like Kristi Noem, wasn't a huge fan of Pam Bondi. I mean, she did well in her hearing, I will say that, but I didn't really think that was Attorney General material. So, I mean, he definitely wanted to choose people he could trust, who would be loyal, who were not from the swamp. Some of them I think are quite, I mean, I like Tulsi Gabbard. I love the guy who's head of housing. I forget his name, but he's been doing great stuff. Obviously, I love Scott Bessent. There are others that are just fantastic. And I noticed that two of the worst ones, well, I'll say I like Tulsi Gabbard, to proceed what I'm about to say. Even the most retrograde right-wing Republican, they still feel like they need diversity and gotta hire the ladies. Gotta get the ladies. No, I promise you, President Trump, we would be so happy with the cabinet of nothing but white men.
And when you say we, you mean Republican voters?
Yes, we're Republicans.
Sure.
We believe in competent white men.
Oh.
I mean, it's fine. I actually like Kash. I will say that.
Really?
He
okay.
Might be a little young for the job. And he's made a few errors. I don't believe the drunken stuff. I think they're gunning for him. He's done good work. Let's put a pause and see what else he does. I mean, he needed to clear out a lot of the FBI, and I think he is doing that. And I think he's a good hater, and I like that. But Republicans just generally, you got to stop feeling like, oh, look, we have a woman.
Right.
You know, to that Sagar, one more thing on that.
Yeah, go.
I see so much of it, from my perspective at least, stems from Trump himself. Like, it emanates from the way Trump has done business for so many years. And he surrounds himself with sort of the media circus intentionally because he can play the media like a fiddle. And that attracts people who will try to enrich themselves off of government service, political service. Is that your sense too? I mean, even some of these folks, like Scott Bessent, has done some interesting stuff with beef and his buddies down in South America. I don't know. I just wonder if some of it is the culture of Trump world, and that was always kind of there for us to see. It's just that some people had different priorities.
That's interesting. I mean, you certainly don't get that vibe from J.D. Vance.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I feel very confident in his integrity. Nor, I think, Tulsi Gabbard. The ones I like, I don't think you see that. And I don't know anything about what you're talking about with Bessent. I'd be surprised. He's already a very rich man. I mean, I think the ickiness you're describing, you see, my guess is you see a lot more of that at Mar-a-Lago. The plastic surgery and the Real Housewives. Look, it's all just so tacky, which I would like to make clear I was perfectly open about in my book, In Trump We Trust. There was no sugarcoating the tackiness.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, there we go. All right, Ann, we appreciate your time.